So last time we talked about how Sufism is related to the fundamental principle of Rahmah in Islam, and how there's a way of viewing the human being, the psychology of the human being, and to develop ourselves. That we are made up of not just a material body, but of a soul, and we're connected to spirit, we're connected to the spirit of Allah, and that it's possible to be guided inwardly by that spirit, by the light of that spirit, if we know the way to do it. And that's what Sufism tries to teach. And we proposed a model of human psychology, a spiritual model of psychology that had the spirit at the center of our being, and that emanates its guiding light through the heart, which is the inner life of the human being, not the physical life, but what's inside of us. And that can tame and guide and develop the nafs to become more and more human, more elevated to higher degrees, until it becomes what's known as the being of light, or the nafs Muhammadiyya, or the nafs al-kamila, the complete self. So now, today we'll go a little bit deeper into, how does it do that? What is the actual work of Tassawuf, and where is it based? Where does this guidance come from? How do we know that this is genuine? And to do this, I want to return us to the beginning, to the very early time of Prophet Muhammad and his community, peace be upon him, to reflect on something that most of you may be familiar with, but maybe not in the way that we will reflect on it tonight. So, just asking the question, what was his message? What did he really teach? What did he come to teach us? And the answer to that is the answer to what is religion? What is the deen? And if we think about it today, what would most Muslims, if we have this room, if we just ask, what words would come to mind? If we ask, what is Islam? What is our religion about? What kind of words are we likely to hear? Right? Probably things like this, right? The 5 pillars would come up for sure. Halal and haram, sharia, peace, one God, belief in Allah and the Prophet. There's a lot of themes and common things that we tend to relate to our religion when we ask, what is Islam? That's what we think about usually. Things like this. Right? Okay. But there's a deeper understanding of what religion is. There's a much more profound understanding of that, which the early followers, the companions of the Prophet, were deeply immersed in. And their understanding of religion was at a different level than what passes for religion today. Because it would not be too far from the truth to say that religion today, not just Islam, all religions, have become really an identity. We belong to a group. We dress a certain way, we eat certain foods, we say certain words, we do certain rituals, and that makes us Muslim, or makes us Christian, or makes us Jewish, or whatever. But that's not really the deen. And I'll hope to show you why I said it. So let's go back to the very early times, right? To the first hijrah, very early in the life of the Muslim community. Okay? When the king of Abyssinia was attended by the first Muslim refugees, he asked them a question. He said, what is this religion you're following? Are you familiar with that story in our history? Most of you would be. Right? Okay. So what was the answer? Who answered the question, and what was the answer? Ja'far ibn Abu Talib was the one who answered the question. And Ja'far was the Prophet's cousin, and he was the closest. What tradition has to say about Ja'far is that he was the closest in character to the Prophet of all the companions. He didn't live very long. He was martyred at one of the battles in the late period of Islam, but he was a very important figure and very deeply connected with the Prophet during his lifetime. So what was his answer? This was his answer. He said, "We were a people lost in ignorance. We oppressed each other. The strong among us devoured the weak. We severed the bonds of mercy between us, and we abused our women." Listen carefully to these words. His answer to what religion is. What is this religion he's following? And then he says, "Until from among us a messenger came. We loved and we trusted him. And he changed us. He changed us. He taught us to be compassionate, to be truthful, to be just, to protect the weak and helpless. So we followed him and we put our faith in him." That was the answer to what is this religion you're following. So what is the religion? What is this deen then? Is it the things we tend to associate with it today after centuries and centuries of time have passed and there's a billion and more of us? This was when there were only maybe 70 Muslims on the whole earth. That was his answer. So what is religion? Religion is that which transforms our hearts. Can you see that in his answer, in what he was talking about? It's a transformation. They were taught something that made them different human beings, changed their whole way of living, their whole outlook on life. That religion, and if you look at his description of what they were like and how they changed from being basically animals, acting in materialistic ways for their own self-interest, to human beings capable of love, of justice, of sacrifice. They were brought from the darkness to the light. And this deen depends on trust and love. His words were, "We trusted and we loved our messenger." Because nobody could have become Muslim if they did not love the Prophet. And nobody could have learned without that love. And this is the deen of Muhammad. The deen of Muhammad is that which transforms us to become more human, to become true to who we really are. And that is what Sufism is about. This is the way of Sufism. It's trying to recreate those conditions to allow human beings to be receptive to divine guidance. Because the divine guidance never stops. The tanzeel is always coming. God's guidance is always coming within us. But we don't know. We're asleep. And Tassawuf is trying to recreate the conditions that the Prophet created, that every Prophet creates, every guide and every messenger creates among his community, to allow guidance to be received in us, in each one of us. Okay? So a way to think about Sufi work is that it's a container that holds people, and to allow this to happen, to give us the opportunity to learn, to really learn what's important for us. It's not a conditioning. It's not a set of dogmas or doctrines. You have to believe these things. You have to do these things. It's not any of that. It's trying to get us to first wake up, realize that there is actually guidance flowing to us all the time. We just have to be receptive to it. We have to listen. And it will guide us. This is the relationship of Rahmah between us and our Rabb. Is when we have that, the more we have that capacity of listening and realizing that we're in a constant relationship of love. That's how we get guided, and that's how we become transformed. That's how we let down our defenses and our habits and become more human, become more capable of love. Because that's the relationship of the divine to creation. It's a relationship of unconditional love. That's what Rahmah is. So, Sufism is the education of our hearts, which is what the Prophet wants. One of his very famous names is the healer of hearts. The Prophet is known as Tabib al-Qulub, the healer of hearts. And that's what Tassawuf is here to do, is to help us heal our hearts. So, and what is a Sufi teacher? So the Sufi teacher, a genuine Sufi teacher, is one who carries in his or her heart that light of the Prophet. And we know it instinctively. When we're in the presence of someone like that, we feel it. And trust and love develops. Just as Ja'far ibn Abi Talib felt it, knew it. Just as the early companions felt it and knew it around the Prophet. And that's what opens us up. That's what lets down our defenses and gives us a chance to learn. A teacher has the capacity to awaken in us our innate nature to love. One of the most fantastic, incredible statements I ever heard by a Sufi master is that the ecological function of a human being is to love. That's our function on earth. Think about that. That every creature has an ecological function. Ours is to love. That's what we're programmed for. That's what we're created for. That's what brings us peace and contentment in our lives, is to love. Not to be loved, but to be ourselves loved. And the teacher has a wisdom to guide us on our journey of self-knowledge. That's what a teacher is. He's not some, magician, not some, cult leader. Although these exist, they're rare, and you can fall into the trap of some of those people. But a genuine teacher is one who recreates, who helps recreate, who helps hold us in that state that can allow our development, allow us to be guided and allow us to learn on our own. It's not one that tells you, this is it, do these things, but guides you, helps guide you, supports you, loves you. So an education system, a spiritual education system such as Tassawuf, for it to be complete, it has to be based on 3 dimensions. It has to be based on love, knowledge, and worship or service. And I'll use service, which is a valid translation of the word ibadah in Arabic, which usually we just learn, we use as worship. You do your salah, that's ibadah. But really ibadah is to serve. In its more complete term is to serve, because the true worship of God is to serve His creation in this world.
has to have these three things. And there's a good reason for it. Because if one of these are missing, you have a real risk of degeneration and turning into something very different than an education of the heart. So if love is missing, if it's just knowledge, let's say love and service are missing. Somebody just teaches you stuff, really interesting stuff, magic of things. Well, knowledge by itself really is the devil, isn't it? Iblis had knowledge. He knew God directly. But he lacked service, the humility to serve. And he lacked love for God's creature. So knowledge by itself is just something very dangerous. It can inflate our ego and make us oppressive tyrants. Love by itself becomes something sentimental. If there's no knowledge, and if there's no locus for it in service, it just becomes a self-indulgence over time. And a lot of spiritual groups tend to fall into that. Right? We feel good, we come, we love each other, but it's degenerate. It doesn't really transform us. It just makes us feel good for a while, and we go back to our old habits, and nothing really changes. It's just entertainment. And if service or worship is by itself, without knowledge and without love, then it becomes hypocrisy. And that's maybe the biggest disease we suffer from in our community now, is that we are mostly on this axis. That we think religion is you do your prayer, you fast, you pay your zakat, that's it. Just appear a certain way and then do whatever you want. Even if we don't intend that, we learn that. There's no love and there's no knowledge. There's a subtle thing that happens to us that teaches us to be hypocrites. If these other two are missing. So what is the Sufi method? Talked before, it prepares our ground, our earth. Each one of us has a ground. It prepares us to be receptive to this divine guidance. And really the method is, we have to understand this thing that we call nafs. And I talked a lot about that last time. Had a lot of different states. I'm not going to go into that again. But that's really critical. Knowing ourselves is so important to the Sufi path and to the transformation that is following in the footsteps of the Prophet. Is to know what this nafs is. And then developing three very important capacities. Conscious presence, conscious love, and conscious will. And they must be conscious. It's not something that happens accidentally. So when I say conscious presence, what is that? It's best described as a comprehensive state of awareness, where we are witnesses. We more and more we are able to actually see things from a much vaster perspective than just ourselves. So that we become more aware of what we're sensing, what we're thinking, what we're feeling, what we're imagining, and what we're doing. And I for one, find myself missing these things often. Right? Like, have you ever driven home and have no idea how you got home? You just appear, the car just gets home and you were somewhere else completely. Right? That's the opposite of presence. Because you're just sunk in your thoughts. Right? Or you're in a conversation with someone and you realize that you haven't heard the word they said. And you start pretending that you're actually listening because it's too embarrassing to say, what did he say? These are opposites of conscious presence. Okay? And these are the easy things to notice. The harder things to notice is what we're feeling, what emotions are going on inside of us. Those are even deeper and more hidden. But with Sufi work, the Sufi method develops these capacities in us. Conscious will has to do with intention, and that's so important, right? And we know this in our tradition, that the beginning of all works is intention. And the meaning of everything we do is based on our intention. إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ وَإِنَّمَا لِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ مَا نَوَى. And the meaning of it is that our actions, the meaning of our actions depend on what we intended. It's not reward and punishment. It's trying to guide us to something important for our development. The ability to make a choice, an actual conscious choice, is very important. And these capacities are latent in us, most of us. They need to be developed. Receptivity. How do we listen? Is there really divine guidance? All of us will nod our heads, yeah, sure. But is it really? Is it really divine guidance? Have you actually listened and heard guidance within you? It's a capacity that needs to be developed, needs to be revived in us, because we have it. It's our birthright as human beings. We're given that, given all of these capacities, but they're dormant. Service is another thing that has to do with conscious will, to truly serve instead of self-serve. And sustained action, the endurance to actually keep going, to overcome stagnation and boredom and the things that tend to take over from us, the entropy that happens within us. These are all capacities having to do with conscious will. And conscious love. What is conscious love? It can be described as surrendering to divine rahmah. That state of really being open. Of being in unity with life. And that can sound corny, but it's also a capacity that we have. To be unified, to be in a state of tawheed. Tawheed is not a belief. Tawheed is an action. You actually are integrating. Tawheed means to make one. A muwahhid is someone who makes one, who makes things into one, integrates them. And recognition of the good, having the capacity to actually know that, to know goodness, and doing what love would do. That realizing that love actually is the actor in the universe. That everything is acted on by that, by this rahmah, by this unconditional love. And bringing beauty into the world. One of Mawlana Rumi's most beautiful statements, he says, how can you find God? How can you find this placeless, traceless one? Where can you find him? And he said, look for him in acts of beauty. And this is ihsan. Ihsan is the highest level of our deen is to be in that state, to be muhsini, which is people who make beautiful. It's not giving sadaqah to a poor person, although that is ihsan too, but really it's to bring beauty into the world. It's to be muhsin. Bring beauty into existence. And loving without an object. To realize that the most genuine of love is just to be love. That you have the capacity just to be love, without object. And these practices, so how do you get there? How do you develop these capacities? It's all rooted in the Quran and in the way of the Prophet. The practices are there. but their meaning is different. So, Salat has that ability to develop all of these capacities that we talked about: conscious love, unconscious presence, and conscious will. But it has to be undertaken with a different meaning, different intention. Purification, zakat. Zakat really is purification. It's not just giving money, you're actually purifying something within you. You're seeking forgiveness, istighfar, tawbah, returning, istiqamah, becoming upright in our life. Willingly letting go of our bad habits is a way to think about istiqamah. And then faith and wholesome action, which is so much repeated in the Quran. Iman and al-a'mal al-salihat. All over the Quran it says, الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمَلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمَلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. So it's these practices. Nothing new, but their meaning is very different. And when you are in a Sufi path, you understand these things when you're in the presence of someone who can guide you and you're receiving the barakah. These capacities begin to develop through these practices, these very fundamental practices. And it follows the way the Prophet was. Seeking truth, not accepting what we get from our parents. Not becoming those who say, we found our ancestors doing this, we'll do the same thing. This is the definition of kufr in the Quran. And shockingly, most of us do that. We're just following whatever our society does.
That is human nature. Everybody learns from each other.
Yes, learn, but seeking truth. To seek the truth is not the same as repeating what somebody else does. Presence, hudur. The Prophet was in a very high state of presence for him to be able to receive revelation, for him to be able to guide people. He was present, and there's a beautiful story about how he tried to teach that to Abu Bakr and Umar during prayer, where he promised that the one who could be present throughout 2 cycles of prayer would get his khirqa. And they competed, they couldn't do it. And Abu Bakr got closest, but then at the very last second, the Prophet sensed that he lost his presence, and he said, what happened? He said, I thought I got there, I thought I made it, and I started thinking about the khirqa. So he lost his presence. Solitude and contemplation, this is a very important aspect of the practice. The Prophet used to go to the cave regularly outside of Mecca to do this, to be in solitude and to contemplate. The same thing applies to us. We need time with ourselves. We need to be in silence. We need to listen deeply within. Intimate conversation of calling to our Rabb. Dua. Dua. The dua of the Prophet is not asking for stuff. The dua of the Prophet is a deeply intimate, loving. It's a kind of lovemaking with his Rabb. Where he calls on him. If you read his dua, it's incredible. It's like he's pouring his heart out. And that's something we need to learn, is this conversation, that we can be in conversation with our Rabb, where we pour our heart out. Not ask for stuff, but actually something much deeper. Fasting and hunger, another important practice. Detachment from worldliness. There's no way to travel this path if we continue to be attached to objects, and to wanting things. You know, we have needs, no question about it, but being attached is a big thing that puts us to sleep. And self-awareness and self-accounting, taking account of ourselves. Some of the great Sufi Masters made a point of actually taking account of their day, by keeping a journal and writing down all the things, what they thought, what they did, what happened to them. And that's a way of self-accounting. And it's following the tradition of the Prophet where he said, take account of your actions before they are accounted for you. And weigh your deeds before they are weighed for you. And die before you die. And then compassion and gentleness. The Prophet is known for that. That was his character. Being compassionate and being gentle. And it starts with ourselves. Learning how to be compassionate with ourselves. And gentle with ourselves. So we can learn. And we can wake up. Okay? I'm gonna bring this to a close now with a couple of ayahs of the Quran that I'd like to share with you and give you maybe a different reflection on it. That's in line with the question of what is this deed? This ayah appears 3 times in the Quran. And it says, هو الذي أرسل رسوله بالهدى ودين الحق ليظهره على الدين كله. And in this version, ولو كره المشركون. No, this one, وكفى بالله شهيدا. Sorry, this version is وكفى بالله شهيدا. In the other 2 versions, it's ولو كره المشركون. Okay, and the transition, it is He who sent His messenger with the guidance and the religion of truth, to make it apparent over all religions, and Allah is sufficient witness. Now, at the tropical level, we say, this is proof that Islam is supreme. Islam stumps all other religions, and everybody should convert, because we're right and everybody else is wrong. Right? But it doesn't say, because it says the religion of truth over all religions. Over all religions. It has nothing to say with being Muslim or Islam or the rituals of Islam or this particular manifestation that we have. A different way to see this meaning when you wake up is to realize that the guidance, prophetic guidance, makes the truth apparent no matter what religion you follow. If you're following in the footsteps of a prophet, of Muhammad or Jesus or Moses or any genuine prophet, the truth becomes apparent in your deen, in what guides you. And then the last thing I'd like to show you is the central role of love in Islam. Sometimes that sounds strange in these days of ours, but love is really central in Islam. And I'll show you another ayah which you may not see that way, but I'll try to explain some of the meanings of it that you could see. This ayah is at the towards in Surah Al-Ma'idah. And it says, O you who have faith, whoever among you turns back from his religion, Allah will surely bring forth a people whom He loves and who love Him, who are humble before the faithful and exalted before the deniers. They strive in the way of Allah and fear no blame from any blameless. This is the favor of Allah. He bestows it on whomever He wills. But Allah is all-encompassing and all-knowing. Okay? This ayah sometimes is used to justify the capital punishment for someone who changes his religion. Okay? It's one of the foundations of that. But if we read this from a different point of view, from the religion of Haqq, the guidance of the Prophet, what is it saying? What is the definition of turning away from your deen? And what's the solution? The solution is that a different people come who love and are loved. You get that? God will bring people whom He loves and who love Him. If you turn back. So the criteria of religion is a relationship of love with the divine. That is the true religion. And the turning away from religion is to turn away from that. To turn away from love. To become a harsh, judgmental, critical individual. And with that, I will bring it to close and open it up for questions and